Hello, welcome back to Election Time News, your one-stop for political summations, poll reviews, nonpartisan predictions, interviews, and compilations on other political forecasters. Today is Wednesday, October 16th, 2024, the second video for the day, and today I'll be doing something different. I'm going to give some signs that there may be a blue wave incoming. Now, to set some things clear immediately before multiple people complain in the comments, I am not saying that there will be one, or even that I think there will be one. I'm just pointing out that there are some signs that something big may be coming on November 5th. My predictions actually still do only have the narrowest of victories for Kamala Harris, basically in Michigan, 1.5 points, Pennsylvania, 1/4 of a point, Wisconsin, 1/4 of a point. Still very, very close. There are just some signs that there may be a blue wave incoming, and so I'll be doing this in two sections. First section will be evidence on why I think there might be a blue wave incoming on November 5th, and the second part will be what it might look like if one is to show up. We're not talking about blue storm here. We're not talking about, a blue Texas or anything. We're talking about a blue wave. So if you like content like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel. I'll be giving weekly updates on the presidential election predictions every Tuesday, leading all the way up to a video with my final prediction on the morning of Election Day, as well as updates on Senate races every Thursday. I have a goal of 500 subscribers by Election Day, so do me a favor and click on that bright red button. Also, make sure to join the Discord, get alerts when I upload, take part in election simulation and test your prediction skills, and more. The link will be in the description. So on to the video here. The first piece of evidence that I have is the polling. Now, I'll be saying there's been a lot of movement for Donald Trump in the recent polling. If we look at the national polls here, Trump has picked up over the past bit. Harris had, around nationally it hasn't been too bad. It's been around 2 3/4 points to a bit under 2.5 points for Kamala Harris. It's been mainly in the swing states and stuff like that it's mainly been an issue in. For example, Arizona, Trump's lead has expanded from just over a point in the beginning of the month to 1.5 now. The same can be said for Georgia, where it was closer to about 3/4 of a point. Now it's a solid point lead. Michigan, here it's 0.7 of a point when it was 1.5. So her lead halved. Pennsylvania is another big one. This is probably the largest state in the election so far. Been consistently around 0.5 point, very, very close, not looking good for her campaign. And Wisconsin went down to a third of what it once was. So you might be saying, how on earth is this going to be a blue wave? If anything, this is going to be the narrowest victory for a Democrat in a long, long time. Now, yes, the polls are narrowing, but they aren't actually moving all that much. In Wisconsin, they only moved by a single point over the past since the beginning of the month. In Pennsylvania, by like 0.5 point, 0.7 of a point or so. Michigan by about a point. Arizona by under a point. Same thing for Georgia. If we look at previous cycles, if we look at Michigan in 2016, Hillary went in with a 78% chance of victory, but projected vote share. The polls here, Clinton +5, Clinton +1, +1 from Trafalgar, +1, +6, +4, +6, +2, +7, +1. But earlier, +10, +6, +4, Trump +3, that odd random one, +5, +7, +5, +7, +8. That's a large collapse from, October or so. Coming in here next, it just ends up collapsing. So, how on earth is this organized? So, +1, +1, +6 randomly, +2, +1, +4, +5, +6, and then you scroll down and you have a lot more of these +6, +9, +7, +5, +12, +12. So many more of these were much, much higher up. And then it dropped down to about +1, +1, +6, +2 when you got down to Election Day. That's a huge collapse of odds. If you look back in, October, she had projected to get 50% of the vote, and then it plummeted down to 48.4. So that's huge. That's a huge collapse. Now, that's mirrored again in places like Georgia. I mean, this one's not as capitalized because Trump was expected to win it, but looking back at October 1st, 48.4 ended up going to 49.5. Arizona, again, not really the same thing. They were actually, but here they were tied, and then Trump ended up taking a 2% lead. Look at North Carolina. Hillary was actually expected to take the lead here. Here they were tied, but then in the middle of the month, Clinton was ahead, but then by election night, she barely had a lead. North Carolina was weird that year. Pennsylvania, 77% chance she was leading here, but look at this collapse from the beginning of the month. There ends up being a spike in the middle of the month, but then she ended up collapsing at the end. So all of these are definitely very, very close. But in the beginning, they were not even anywhere close to looking competitive. It looked like it was going to be an absolutely safe race for Hillary Clinton. So the fact that they ended up getting so ridiculously close at the end, between 2 or 3 points, it's such a collapse for Hillary Clinton. You end up looking at the 2020 results. Especially, Joe Biden was expected to win by 8 points or so, and then by the end here, he ended up spiking back up right before election night. But down here, he was at 6.5 points. That's a 2-point drop right there. You look at Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania had a bit better polling. Wisconsin's just weird by itself. Pennsylvania here in the beginning of the month, 5.5, you know, by 4.7. That's a half-point collapse. Next is gonna be Michigan. If you look at Michigan, he was actually up by 8 points, ended up being about 8. So I mean, there's still it seemed to vary, but there is a lot of there was a very quick collapse in 2016 and 2020 that really hasn't happened for Kamala Harris. It's dropped a bit, but it really hasn't moved that much percentage-wise or even just number-wise. Both of them were performing very well, but then they completely collapsed. She hasn't been performing very well, but she's been staying steady. She only lost, half a point in Michigan, for example. So that in and of itself, to me, is a huge flag that there might be some stronger support continuing for Kamala Harris, and there's still some energy going on here that might be unexpected. So that's how this is not going to be 2016. More comparing to 2016 than 2020, because 2020, most people were able to realize that Joe Biden was going to win the election by election night. Second thing is going to be the Never Trump movement, essentially. Now, Arizona's weird here, but looking at the party registration here, we're looking at Kamala Harris's non-democratic support. In Arizona here, 279 Democrats are voting for her, and out of 300, 14 are voting for Donald Trump, 5 for someone else, 2 undecided. But Republicans here, 15 Republicans are going to vote. We're going to vote for We're going to vote for Kamala Harris. 15 Republicans going to vote for Kamala Harris, opposed to 14. So that is still a gain of about 1. And independents, 177 for Kamala Harris, 158 for Donald Trump. So she's getting stronger support from independents. Looking here at Georgia, moving over here, party affiliation Republican. Who are you likely to vote for? Kamala Harris, 22 Republicans voting for Kamala Harris, 10 Democrats voting for Donald Trump, 136 independents for Kamala Harris, 129 for Donald Trump. And I think that the registration is actually relatively close to even at this point in the state of Georgia. So this is more showing across the aisle support for Kamala Harris. And looking in here, party affiliation, 24 Republicans voting for Kamala Harris, 15 Democrats for Donald Trump, and undecideds actually in the state of Michigan are going for Donald Trump, but still more Republicans voting for Kamala Harris. Quite a bit of a strong movement here. Moving into Nevada. Now, this actually is sadly a 1-month-old poll, but it's still gonna not exactly 1 month old. I forget exactly how old it is, but It's not very new, unfortunately, but still, it's a good signifier of how strong some of these supports are. Of course, shouldn't be taken 100% at face value. Now it's gonna lag a bit for some reason. Okay, so here we have 17 Republicans voting for Kamala Harris, 20 Democrats voting for Donald Trump. So it's splitting about even, 164. So Nevada seems to have a bit less support. But in some of these really key states, like Georgia, for example, it's looking very good for Kamala Harris for across-the-line support. Same thing for Michigan. Here, party registration, 21 for Kamala Harris, 140, split even in North Carolina. Normally, independents end up carrying the Republican victory in the state of North Carolina. In Pennsylvania, the key swing state of Pennsylvania, held today 27 Republicans for Donald Trump, 33 Democrats for Kamala Harris, but 91 to 78 for independents. That's relatively stronger support for Kamala Harris here. If you look at the demographics information, that's going to be a bit off. There always are. Kamala Harris, 108 to 11. That's actually not all that bad. 108 to 11. That's 90 to 10. That's about what we should expect. So looking at 90 to 10 in Pennsylvania, looking over in Georgia, 90 to 10% for the black vote, that would definitely show a good chance that there is, in fact, going to be a landslide. 252 to 30. That's 253. Around 85% or so for Kamala Harris. So even then, that would be quite a bit of a jump for Donald Trump here. So that's still surprising for the black vote, especially in Georgia. But still, that may be enough in order for this increase in white vote is actually especially interesting. So there may be a carrying of the state of Georgia for Kamala Harris. But that's example number 2 here, looking at some of these crosstabs, looking at the overall changes in how apparently cross partisan boundaries Kamala Harris is able to get. And lastly is going to be early voting. I know I originally said that I wasn't going to go into early voting data until Friday, but this is a video that I ended up coming up with that I was going to do because I feel like there's definitely a chance there's going to end up being a blue wave coming up, and so I wanted to share some information just in case I somehow ended up being right, so then I could at least say that I at least somewhat predicted it. But anyway, looking at some of this early voting data, it's 69% Democrats, 23% Republicans, 8% other in Pennsylvania, 416,000 ballots have been given, majority Republicans in Ohio. Most of these are, now Georgia opened today, and there's a large amount of registrations today. They actually broke a new record today. So, 12,873 ballots dropped in, 49% Democrat Party registration. Now, none of these are actually the votes. We cannot see those until election night, but we do have our numbers of ballots and the party registration of the person who dropped them off. And sometimes it's publicly available, sometimes it's just modeled. In some states, it is just modeled by the company Target Smart based off of multiple commercial sources, it says. But these large spikes, these are actually a bit interesting. If you look at the state details go into, for example, Pennsylvania, the most important state this election cycle, 1.629 million mail-in ballots requested, mainly from registered Democrats, about 2/3 of them, and so it's really looking. No, thank you. It's really looking like there's a pretty good chance. This is about on par for 2020, I believe, somewhere around that point. And party registration, these mail-in ballots, this shows that there's actually a slightly unproportional amount. Now, unfortunately, we don't see any vote numbers. We can't actually see any vote numbers, obviously, until election night. But this definitely looks very hopeful for the Democrats, considering how it's actually a bit less, I believe. I'm going to look at 2016's numbers, or 2020's numbers. And so it was about 66% or so Democratic early voting at that point. So looking at 61%, that's actually a bit less than it was. 11% independents. That's mainly going to be, that's going to go back to the crosstabs, looking at the independent support for Kamala Harris here. So there's a few small signs that there might be something coming up here. They're not looking like they're even going to be a 2022 scale. So looking at the map here, it's really not going to be that big of a jump from anything. We're going to obviously see the safe states be safe, as, isn't to be expected. Even in the case of a Trump blowout, we definitely be seeing these go safe. We're going to see, these states end up being... Virginia is probably going to go up to a 10-point margin again. If there's a blue wave here, it's going to go up to 10. Joe Biden won it by 10 in 2020, so I definitely see that it would go up to about that point. New Hampshire is going to be closer to about 9 points or so. Maine might just barely hit safe. Maine second isn't really going to move much. It's still going to go red. These guys are going to... West Virginia is going to stay red. All of these southern regions are going to stay red as they are, and there's not going to be much movement amongst them. However, we may see some movement in South Carolina. It might drop below 10%, depending on how strong the black vote comes out in support of Kamala Harris in that region, especially some Republican voters. Looking at those crosstabs again, there was quite a bit of support in some of the southern regions. I think Georgia was actually the one that she performed the best in with the cross-party support. Texas would probably be more lean Republican, be closer to around 3 to 4 points or so, quite a bit closer. Same thing can be said for Florida. It would probably be about the 2020 margin for Donald Trump. Looking at Ohio, it would definitely be around 6 points or so. Iowa would probably be around 6 points as well, relatively close. Alaska would be closer to like 5 points or so. It's actually a relatively left-trending state. It's definitely going to be moving to the left, so if anything, it would have a large jump towards the left. And then we'd see, a quite relatively solid Michigan tilt in all of the swing states, actually. All of these states would go blue, including North Carolina, because it's been polling relatively close. And in the polling by itself, it's just barely going red at the moment, so it wouldn't take too big of a nudge. It's still within the margin of error, 1%. At the beginning of the month, it was half, so he's gone up by a half a point in that region, so he's really not doing that well. But more signs, again, looking back at the polls, Donald Trump's own internals, Trump up by 1 in North Carolina. If you'd follow my rule, shift by 2 for internals, shift by 1 for partisan. You end up with Trump plus 1 in this one by Trafalgar Group. Trump is actually down by 1. Harris plus 1 for this poll by Donald Trump himself. Same thing, you apply it to Pennsylvania. Down here, you have, I ignore New York Times, Siena, because they seem to be off this cycle and know what's going on here. Donald Trump's own polls shifted by 2 again. Harris ends up being up by 1. Tip Insights actually seem to be relatively good this cycle. They seem to be a bit confused, though. Not really sure what's going on with these two starkly different. This is the registered voters. One with registered voters actually has Harris up by 4, which I think is going to be a bit off. But that appears to be doing pretty good for her there. Wisconsin, same sort of deal here. Trump ahead by 1 in his own poll. That's going to be Harris minus 1. So these Republican-leaning polls are also having him just barely up. That would probably end up being about a 9-point lead for Nebraska 2nd District going back to this. So that would be the 319-219. This is basically the best-case scenario for Kamala Harris if there's going to be a blue wave this election cycle, which may happen. Now, again, I really don't see it happening. I think that Trump is going to win North Carolina. He's going to win Arizona. He's going to win Georgia. He's going to win those 3 Sunbelt states with a slight margin here. But you can't rule out this possibility that may come in on election night just based off of these few signs. Now, I don't really see much potential for a red wave. There's definitely potential for a red splash, you could say, which would be even, that'd be more like 2016, where you'd have, the red rust belt up here, closer for these margins. You're going to have flipped Nevada, something along these lines, 312, 226 or so. This would be pretty close. Ramping up these margins again. Safe for these two. It's going to get stronger than it's ever been before in those states. This is going to be weakened down a bit. Same for here. So I mean, there's still a chance that it could really go either way. But out of the two, I think a blue wave is probably more likely out of the red splash blue wave scenarios, just based on that personal information. Now, please do leave your takes on this in the comments. I would love to hear it. Maybe I'm overseeing some things. Maybe I'm misreading some things. But I just wanted to point this out just in case it does end up happening, because I wanted to say that this is how I was taking this information. And in the case that it does end up happening, I wanted to just be on the record that, I kind of saw it coming. So, you got to get your record out there while you're new. But, thank you all so much for watching again. For all who are curious, this is in fact my actual election map as of right, and missed it. This is my actual election map as of right now, essentially. Very, very narrow wins for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. But, of course, if you want to watch all those videos, there was one that came out earlier today and the one that came out yesterday. So thank you all so much for watching. Have a fabulous rest of your day. Make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss the election night live stream. And thank you for watching again.